The hard-right government of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faced more protests and calls for a general strike Monday against its controversial push to overhaul the justice system. Netanyahu was due to address the nation, with speculation in Israeli media that he could pause the judicial reforms, a day after sacking his defense minister who had broken ranks over the divisive issue, and after President Isaac Herzog again urged an immediate stop to the reform package for the sake of the unity of the people of Israel. The Israel Medical Association quickly followed suit, also announcing a full strike in the health system that will impact all public hospitals. As the news trickled in, tens of thousands of protesters were out on the streets, waving blue and white Israeli flags. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's judicial overhaul has sparked unprecedented opposition from across Israeli society. In Jerusalem, police and soldiers used water cannon against demonstrators near Netanyahu's house.
To be honest, it's incredible. I can't believe what's going on in Israel. It's just madness. It's complete madness. All the authorities, all the people that have from all the jurisdictions, from the militaries, from the financial sectors, from all the sectors in Israel, saying that this reform or whatever you call it is completely crazy, and Israel has become a very dangerous place to be in at the moment.
Critics say Netanyahu, who is on trial for corruption, is trying to rein in the judges in an ultimate attempt to avoid going to jail himself, reported the BBC. They say the judicial overhaul plans would threaten democratic checks on ministers by the courts. Israel's top trade union chief called a general strike to protest against the proposed changes, which would weaken the powers of the judiciary and which demonstrators have for months decried as a threat to Israeli liberal democracy. The nationwide walkout was called hours after union chief pressed for an immediate halt to the judicial program, following more major demonstrations and street clashes in Tel Aviv overnight. The plan to hand more control to politicians and diminish the role of the Supreme Court has ignited months of protests and sparked concern from Israel's top allies, including the United States. The White House noted that President Joe Biden recently told Netanyahu that democratic values have always been, and must remain, a hallmark of the U.S.-Israel relationship. Netanyahu's government, a coalition between his Likud party and extreme right and ultra-Orthodox allies, has argued that changes are needed to rebalance powers between lawmakers and the judiciary. Yoav Gallant, the former defense minister and staunch ally of Netanyahu, earlier called for a halt to the reforms, with lawmakers scheduled to vote this week on a central part of the proposals, which would change the way judges are appointed. Moments after this statement, Netanyahu sacked Gallant. Demonstrators seized a central highway in Tel Aviv, blocking traffic and burning tires. Some threw metal barricades while police deployed water cannon. Israel is not a dictatorship, protesters chanted as a large crowd waved national flags and blew air horns. After months of rallies, including a weekend demonstration that brought out an estimated 200,000 people in Tel Aviv, protesters in the coastal city said it felt like a sort of climax. In Jerusalem, demonstrators gathered Sunday outside the Prime Minister's residence, while others rallied in the northern city of Haifa and Beer Sheva in the south. The activist movement has announced a national paralysis week, including protests outside ministers' homes and parliament. Gallant, a former general, was named to his post in December as part of Netanyahu's new government. Two other Likud lawmakers have voiced support for Gallant, raising questions over whether the government could count on a majority if it pushes ahead with a vote. Israel's consul general in New York, Asaf Samir, tendered his resignation Sunday over Netanyahu's dangerous decision. Opposition leader Yair Lapid said that while the prime minister had sacked Gallant, he cannot fire the people of Israel who are standing up to the insanity of the coalition. Netanyahu said Thursday that the legislation due in the parliamentary chamber next week does not take control of the court but balances and diversifies it. A parliamentary committee has amended the draft law with the aim of making it more palatable to opponents, but the opposition has ruled out backing any part of the reform package until all legislative steps are halted. Netanyahu last week vowed to responsibly advance the reforms and end the rift they have caused. Netanyahu is on trial over charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust, which he denies. His broadcast gave rise to contempt of court accusations filed with the Supreme Court by the Movement for Quality Government in Israel, an anti-corruption campaign group. The group's complaint alleges Netanyahu violated a court ruling that an accused prime minister does not have the right to act in a matter that could constitute a conflict of interest. Netanyahu said he would do everything to calm the situation and end the rift in the nation, and that his administration remained determined to correct and responsibly advance the democratic reform that will restore the proper balance between the authorities. Netanyahu came under fire a day later from Israel's Attorney General, Gali Baharav Miara, who who said his public intervention was illegal due to his ongoing corruption trial. The top legal official cited a previous court ruling that an indicted prime minister has no right to act on a matter that could place him in a conflict of interest. Some 3 months since taking office, Netanyahu's nationalist religious coalition has been plunged into crisis over the bitter divisions exposed by its flagship judicial overhaul plans.